Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Thanks for the BIM Summit as well, obviously, for inviting me to this. So the topic I was going to cover was BIM and where is it heading. I slightly changed it from what I submitted, so apologies to anyone that was looking at the submission, because of time frames and because of the information focus. So I decided to change it slightly to be more about information. A little bit about myself and who I work for. So my name's Andrew Victor. I work at Arcadis. I'm in the global digital transformation of design and engineering roles. So my role is to work globally with all the countries around BIM and around design automation and other areas to see how they're moving forward from a global perspective. You can see from there we're quite a varied company, 36,000 staff, not including some acquisitions lately. The bit I'm responsible for trying to move forward is about 12,000 staff, and that makes about 12,000, 15,000 projects in any year that we're working on from a D&E perspective. So those are the ones I need to work with the countries on in terms of how are we delivering it, how can we improve it, and it's people, process, technology. That's the kind of bits I focus on, all three of those areas. The topic was called History of BIM. So rather than trying to give a spiel about the technology and where it's gone from the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, I actually decided I was going to try and change it slightly in terms of what I was going to talk about. And in terms of BIM as a topic that's on Google Trends, for example, since 2004, you can see in different countries how much people have started to ask for the word BIM on Google compared to other countries, and worldwide you can see a growth. I did do a check to make sure it was BIM in relation to AEC and in relation to our world, not BIM in any other world. And so really, yes, it was. It was mostly the top 20 reasons were all related to building information modeling, management, all related to AEC. So it wasn't BIM in a completely different industry to ours. But you can see there that really, in some ways, it's plateaued for some countries, and there hasn't been any extra activity. You might hear technology companies, give statistics around that we're only at 16% saturation of BIM in AEC compared to where it could be, but really we haven't seen too much change in that. So myself, I've been involved since about 2005, so I've seen some level of growth, but clearly most of it has not really happened in the UK, or it's plateaued after some of the mandates came through. For those of you wondering what the red line is the word GIS. So how often is the word GIS checked for? And you can see there that it had a lot of activity, and then actually it's plateaued and come quite close to BIM in terms. And again, I did check GIS. It is Geographical Information Systems. It's not another kind of an acronym that was also called GIS that was being searched. But I think, in Arcadis we have about 1,500 GIS staff, and so when BIM started to emerge, there was a lot of conversation and reflection around, well, what does that mean for us? Are we each going to take each other's work? There's a version of me from the BIM side that's a GIS person at Arcadis, and so we've talked for many years about how we're trying to grow our own areas and our capabilities. So really, you can see there that none of us have really taken each other's work. If anything, we just need to collaborate more and get more involved with each other. Being the BIM Summit and being around information, I thought I'd start with, in fact, it's actually even better. You can only just see the item that's on the screen there, which is even better. And it's really around an old parable that's been around for many hundreds of years. There's been Buddhist versions, Hindu and Jain versions of this text, but it's all about an animal in the dark and trying to work out what that animal is, and a series of people going into a dark room, trying to work out what that animal is while they're looking at it. And each of them is looking at a different part of the animal. And in the parables, one of the people feels a leg and says, well, it feels like it's a tree. There's a statue of a tree, or there's a tree in here. Another one was feeling an ear, and they were feeling, well, actually, it's more like a fan. There's a fan in here. And there's many versions of this story around what they all start seeing and their own interpretations of the information, I would argue, in this instance, of what they're seeing. And really, there's versions of the parable where they start talking in a positive way and learning from each other and work by communicating, collaborating, and working out actually it's an elephant they're looking at. But there are other ones they're arguing and they get into disputes. And I think that's kind of similar for our industry when it comes to information and how we see information, and different people are looking at it with different lenses, and I think we need to kind of be a little bit conscious and aware of that. Working at Arcadis, we have about 4,000, 5,000 staff, and so from design and in cost and commercial management. In design and engineering, we often talk about cost data being embedded on models so that design decisions are made more effectively. But then when you talk to the cost and commercial management community, the idea of cost data can be very fluid and very different as to what it's showing, and it can be performance matrix or performance benchmarking. There's huge fluctuations on the pricing of products, depending on if a client is buying out volume for multiple products, single products. If it's a material that fluctuates daily on its cost, that all does need to be taken into account. And so when we're trying to make decisions on design through information and hoping to have cost data in there, we have to be aware that there is challenges there about that real-time data really to make those decisions and when that milestone is going to be hit. So when we're talking about even information, we have to be quite conscious we're all looking at it from a slightly different dynamic. And that's the same for sustainability. We all have different sustainability development goals that we each, as a company or as an industry or as a country, are aspiring to achieve. And again, we have to then work out what information is going to help us to reach that goal specific to our own development goals, and how does it relate to the broader enterprise maybe of the development goals. So with that in mind, one of the areas I kind of think about is the known unknowns, really, and things that I try to consider with the clients that we have. As I said, it's about 12,000 projects in any year, lots of key clients in there, multinational clients in there. And things such as when it comes to information management, some of the areas we need to look at is, well, what sort of client are we looking at? Are we looking at a branded house client, a client that has many companies under one brand? Or is it a house of brands? So like a Marriott, where they have 30 different types of hotel chains all under the Marriott branch. And they all have different then information requirements because they work as siloed companies. They don't have to work as one cohesive company. And if they do work as a cohesive company, it's only singular bits of elements of information that are relevant and appropriate to them. The house of brands, really, you could kind of think of other than Marriott, the pharmaceutical world, the foods world. There's lots of brands in there that own many, many products that all have many different names. Branded houses, you can think of Virgin, but you've also got Google, and you've also got many others out there. Some of the supermarket retailers, they have specific ways around that as well. So when you're trying to do information management and trying to get those initial information requirements, try to understand, well, who is the client and how do they relate to the broader spectrum of who owns them? And are we speaking to the right people to get that information that we need to make it successful? Another one, well, who's going to create the information? There is huge differentiations on projects in terms of, is it a mass production project where the information might be more static but multiply used, or is it a mass customization? Some of the great projects we saw shown earlier were, I would argue, some of the mass customization. So the idea of information management in that is going to be very different to a project where there's a huge amount of customization happening compared to one where it's mass production. So, you can think of retail stores for that, and obviously you can think of signature projects, landmark projects, like the Red Sea Company and some of the other colleagues that presented some. And then finally, how are we going to measure the success? That's the other one we have to do with the clients all the time, and we measure it against what sector are you in, where are you geographically positioned, and also what technologies are you planning to use? Is technology appropriately set up to be able to do these things? Because potentially it's not, and you have to do more around putting people in front of changing that work, integrating, combining, the effort of information management at that point could be much more labor intensive. So we do that mapping, and then we ask clients, and again, because I'm in the digital transformation side, it's all about metrics, it's all about measuring success and OKRs, the objective key results, and KPIs, key performance indicators, all those acronyms, because it's all things we're going to need to measure and communicate on how things are progressing and where they're going. I thought I'd use this part of this sort of framework I saw from some years back that a colleague of mine presented to me, and it was really useful, and I've used it many, many occasions, and it's actually called the IoT World Forum Reference Model. And what it talks about really is the different layers of involvement and engagement in the delivery of information or in the delivery of a product, let's say. And you could be working as a company at level 7, where your role is mainly about consultancy, collaboration, working with people. Maybe you're at level 6 or 5, which is more around you're making apps, reports, applications. Maybe your role is more aggregation of information. You're in a role of aggregating information. Information managers, I would argue, sit very much in that space. Or maybe you're more in a data accumulation. Are you hosting data? Are you in the BIM world, are you one of those people that's hosting and aggregating and going to be an adjudicator for the project? And then as you head towards the levels below that, 3, 2, and 1, really you start heading towards hardware in development. Are you doing edge computing? Are you building actual kit that you're going to give clients? And so I've tried to put a little bit of that around the BIM with a BIM lens. So, you know, as a company and as companies that we work in, are we trying to work in that soft skills area of consulting, or are we more around the application and data abstraction role? You know, is that the services that we want to offer? And is it around services, or is it a product we're going to be building? Is it client-specific or project-specific dashboards? Is that where we're going to make our money? And that's the sort of things that companies like ours need to make decisions, those in the AEC industry in a service space. Or are you going to be doing BIM hosting? You know, is that where your money is? Is that what your role is? Is it put you in a good place for asset management, you know, and that sort of thing? Or is GIS world really going to be in that space much more than us? Those are kind of questions we have to ask ourselves. And then obviously you'll see some kit outside and in other events, you know, where you're talking about more heading towards edge computing, connectivity, and physical devices. And I personally try to map this against sectors and in terms of countries where in Arcadis we are, so that I can see, well, where is there potential growth in the skills that we want to deliver to clients and engage with clients on related to each of these different levels. And that's what I work with. I'm going to finish with this slide here, which I know that as hopefully many of you recognize this guy, Steve Sasson, the Kodak engineer that invented the digital camera in 1975, and he presented the first digital camera, and he presented it to the leadership at Kodak, and their exact quote was, "Nice idea, don't show anyone," because the money was being made for them from printing photographs. And so the idea of a camera that took away that and basically just showed people on a screen what that information was, they said was a good idea, but yeah, please don't show anyone, it's not going to go anywhere. They didn't really think in 75 it was going to go anywhere. But the guy I'm going to focus on personally is this guy, Vincent Baraba, who in 1981, I was reading up on Kodak quite a bit because I found it difficult to believe that Kodak, a multi-million dollar company, would not have some level of knowledge and intelligence about what's coming in the future and try to react to where they saw things coming. And the truth is they did. In 1981, they'd actually spent time through the person that was leading, Vincent Baraba, was the head of market intelligence, around where, and he spent a hell of a lot of money, Kodak's money, to try to work out where is the industry going and where, you know, is it really going to impact us? And the results in 81 that they found was that the report came back to the leadership and said, look, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that digital photography, the bad news is, I'll start with bad. The bad news is that digital photography does have the potential to take away the work you do and to remove a lot of the money you make, which is from printing photographs. The good thing is, though, you have 10 years to get your act together and to decide on what you want your company to look like in the future. And when you look at the trajectory in one of these books that I was reading on this, the 10 years was pretty accurate. It took 10 years, really, for that change to happen and that bad news to happen, where the work was taken from them. But the main reasons and the factors they said that were important to understand were, it was based on the fact that the cost of digital photography equipment was going to go down, the quality of images and prints was likely to increase, and the interoperability of various components such as cameras and displays was also going to vastly improve. And the reason I mention this specific topic on this meeting is I feel we are in those areas of cost, quality, and interoperability. Everything is starting to head towards us trying to tackle those areas of what we deliver and what we do on projects. And you know, some of the presentations around AI absolutely explained why interoperability is going to take away some of that complexity and improve some of that complexity, or take away some of that and improve quality. So really for us, I would argue as an industry, the writing's on the wall for us. We don't have 10 years, I don't think. AI is going to accelerate that. But really, the key factors are there. We just need to be prepared and know what is it we want to be. And I would argue, try to look through those levels that I was showing earlier, work out what sort of companies you want to be, not just on the service delivery, but on the client side. And then obviously, a company like all the ones in this room can kind of help you on that journey and then see where we want to go. So with that, I don't know if I'm at 15 minutes, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, cool. Good.